Hello and welcome to The Morning Bean, a show not about coffee. Instead, we enjoy our coffee while discussing current events. I'm your host, Denny London, and today's episode is called Let the Censorship Begin, Big Tech's Plan to Steal the 2022 Midterms. Before we jump into the downfall of society and possibly the next stolen election, I said it, please consider giving the show a follow and a 5-star review. It really helps those crazy robot algorithms. Algorithms. Another packed show for you today. Now, I could have made today's show super easy by talking about the following. Number one, FBI raid on Donald Trump, which is the greatest threat to our nation since the Civil War. I'm being completely serious. If you want up-to-date info, check out Dan Bongino's podcast or the homie Tucker Carlson. Or even check out last week's show, where, not to toot my own horn, but I absolutely nailed the key talking points in regards to this situation. It starts around the 10-minute mark. We aren't going to talk about that. And we also aren't going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, aka Build Back Better dressed up for Halloween, being signed into law, which does nothing to combat inflation unless you have $70,000 to spend on an EV, solar panels, and energy-efficient windows. I watched the House debate for this bill for 3 hours on Friday. Off and on, of course. I wasn't sitting there glued to the TV. And over 70 Democrats voted by proxy, which means they didn't even participate in the conversation, in the debate. What's the point? If you don't show up to work, you shouldn't get paid. You shouldn't be able to vote for it. I'll recap to you how it went. You didn't miss much. Republicans. This bill will raise taxes on every American and hire 87,000 new people to the IRS. Democrats. This bill will not raise taxes on every American or hire 87,000 people to the IRS. And then there's me sitting there saying, what the F is the truth? WTF, mate? Why isn't it obvious? Our system seems broken. We need smaller bills with clearer text. And finally, we're not going to highlight the shocking defeat of Liz Cheney in the Wyoming primary. By shocking, I mean not shocking at all. What was shocking, though, is that in her concession speech, where she admits defeat, she compared herself to Abraham Lincoln and even gave us a little taste towards a potential 2024 presidential run. Keep in mind, this woman lost by 38 points. 38%. Hopefully she runs as a Democrat in 2024 with AOC. Nope, we aren't going to talk about those three things. Instead, on today's show, we're going to discuss Big Tech's plan to steal the 2022 midterm election. They're being upfront about it this time, people. And as always, we'll have You Probably Shouldn't Tweet It and the news ratings. But first, 3 quick ones. That was kind of already 3 quick ones, but 3 quick ones. Our first quick one. Breaking news. After 2 years, 3 failed vaccines, 4 failed boosters, and a failed national vaccine mandate, the CDC have finally changed their guidance on the cocoa. Let's take a look. Per CDC.gov, today the CDC is streamlining its COVID-19 guidance to help people better understand their risk, how to protect themselves and others, what actions to take if exposed to COVID-19, and what actions to take if they are sick or test positive for the virus. COVID-19 continues to circulate globally. However, with so many tools available to us for reducing COVID-19 severity, there's significantly less risk of severe illness, hospitalization, and death compared to earlier in the pandemic. We're in a stronger place today as a nation with more tools like vaccination, boosters, and treatments to protect ourselves in our communities from severe illness from COVID-19, said Greta Massetti, PhD, MPH, MMWR, PIMP, author. We also have a better understanding of how to protect people from being exposed to the virus, like wearing high-quality masks. Yeah, because wearing a mask is like using a chain link fence to keep mosquitoes out. It doesn't make any sense. I did a whole show about that not too long ago. It was called Future Masks Off or something like that. It was one of the first ones. It was like the 7th one. Nonetheless, like wearing high-quality masks, testing, and improved ventilation. This guidance acknowledges that the pandemic is not over, but also helps us move to a point where COVID is no longer severely disrupts our daily lives. The pandemic will never be over, people. They need it. They love it. Once you give somebody the taste of that power, you'll never take it back from them unless you put them in their place. In support of this update, the CDC is continuing to promote the importance of being up to date with vaccination. Get your shots, you dirty dogs. To protect people against serious illness, hospitalization, and death, protection provided by the current vaccine against symptomatic infection and transmission is less than that against severe disease and diminishes over time. So why would people... Okay. Especially against the currently circulating variants. For this reason, it is important to stay up to date, especially as new vaccines become available. But there aren't new vaccines. You keep giving people the same vaccine, and you just said in that statement, it's not going to help. All right, so what are the new COVID-19 guidelines? Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. New COVID-19 guidance from CDC focuses on, wait for it, individual decisions. That pause is staying in the show on purpose, because that's me shocked. Those exposed to the virus are no longer required to quarantine. Unvaccinated people now have the same guidance as vaccinated people. I want to personally thank our overlords from the CDC for giving us unvaccinated people our rights back. Students can stay in class after being exposed to the virus. However, a lot of liberal states are still forcing their students to wear masks, and it's no longer recommended to screen those without symptoms. Yes, COVID-19 was the first time in history that we were testing people for a sickness when they weren't sick. So it's good to see that we're done doing that. Now, ironically, or possibly not, this updated guidance came in conjunction with an article from The Defender. They're a children's health defense news and views website, and they gave us some incredible insight, backed by data, on the dangers of these vaccines. CDC drops quarantine distancing recommendations as 1.3 million COVID vaccine injuries reported to Vaers. Vaers data released Friday by the Centers of Disease Control, CDC, and Prevention shows 1,379,438 reports of adverse events from all age groups following COVID-19 vaccines, including 30,162 deaths and 251,075 serious injuries between December 14, 2020 and August 5, 2022. Something worth noting, these are worldwide deaths and injuries from the vaccine, and according to Vaers themselves, their selves, I'm not sure which pronoun to use here. According to the Vaers site, underreporting is one of the main limitations of passive surveillance systems, including Vaers. The term underreporting refers to the fact that Vaers only receives reports for only a small fraction of actual adverse events. Out of those 30,000 deaths, it would not include the sudden adult death syndrome that's going around. Fewer than 1% of vaccine adverse events are actually reported. Of those 30,162 reported deaths, 19,462 are attributed to the Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, 8,038 to Moderna, 2,613 to the J&J Johnson & Johnson, and no cases yet reported for Novavax. On paper, it's just a number, 30,162 deaths. However, those numbers are real people. We live in a day and age where we just are so desensitized to all the news we see. They are someone's family, someone's friend, and in every single case, somebody's neighbor. In 100% of these cases, they are people who thought they were doing the right thing. The right thing by taking this experimental vaccine because our government and the fake news told you to do so. If you didn't take it, you were a science denier. You were anti-vaccine. You were the devil. And you were trying to kill someone's grandmother. And this is my promise to all those listening out there. I will never, ever stop talking about this. Not until those in power, those in charge, are charged with crimes against humanity and held accountable. Our second quick one is a two-year-old article by Good Housekeeping titled, "It's Not Realistic to Try and Raise Kids Who Are Colorblind." This specific article was featured under Apple News' Back to School section of the app. The article states, babies as young as 3 months old start to process ideas about race. We owe it to our kids to talk about it. It could be uncomfortable to talk about race with anyone, let alone figure out a way to distill an explanation of race and our country's legacy of racism against Black, Indigenous people of color. BIPOC to a level that a kid can understand. You heard that right, ladies and gentlemen. Babies as young as 3 months start to process ideas about race. The two biggest threats to our democracy have now been confirmed. The first obviously being white supremacy, duh. The second being racist babies. I really wish I could roll my R's like Ben Shapiro. Before we take a quick glance at this ridiculous article, let me give you some facts about Good Housekeeping. Per Google, Good Housekeeping is an American women's magazine featuring articles about women's interests, product testing, recipes, diet, and health, as well as literacy articles. I guess this would have fallen under literacy articles. The first issue date was May 2nd, 1885. They're based in, you guessed it, New York, New York. The article is broken down into 6 sections. I present them to you as bullet points in audio form. It's not realistic to raise kids to be colorblind. Point out differences in skin tones to kids from the very beginning. This way they know that this person is different than you. When kids get to elementary school, appeal to kids' innate sense of fairness. As they get older, give them the tools to stand up to peer pressure. Supplement what they learn in school. If school isn't connecting the dots for kids about how the racism they learn about in history affects how we all live today, you can make the connections for them. Teach them about the history of racial oppression and how racism is bigger than people having stereotypes or prejudices. It's about a system of power and is built into our laws, institutions, policies, and so forth, says Dr. Hagerman. This might mean that parents need to do some learning in this area, and families can do this learning together. We could all sit in a powwow in a circle and say, we are racist. The reason I'm including this critical race theory article in today's show is because Apple News has 135 million active users. That's a lot of people, and a lot of people go there to get their news, myself included. The last thing we need to do, this is important, the last thing we need to do is raise a bunch of white people thinking they are a privileged class who should be ashamed of themselves, and at the same time, raising a bunch of BIPOC, their word not mine, BIPOC folks, thinking they have no chance from the moment they are born. Instead, we should congratulate them for winning the lottery and being born in the US of A, the greatest and most powerful country in the world. You know your boy, Day in London, is doing his homework when I'm bringing you commentary on a Good Housekeeping article. Name another weekly political podcast that would do the same. Let me know on Getter or Twitter at Denny London. Our final quick one. The FBI is part of the deep state. I saw this on Getter, and you know what? It's 100% true. It's a picture. Since 2015, the FBI propagated the Russian collusion hoax to hurt the Trump administration, manufactured the Whitmer kidnapping case, and blamed it on Trump before the election. That is a spicy situation, that Whitmer kidnapping case. I may give you an update on that next week once everything concludes in court, but holy shit. The FBI is corrupt. Helped Biden's presidential campaign by burying Hunter's illegal activities, misclassified domestic extremism cases to support the Biden narrative. You remember when he said the greatest threat to this nation is white supremacy? Targeted conservative parents who protested pandemic policies at school boards, placed at least 2 informants at the Capitol on January 6th who participated in the riot, and then finally raided Trump's home to find anything that could prevent him from running in 2024. We've discussed a number of these topics on the show, but it really puts things into perspective when they are listed like that. Hashtag defund the FBI. That's a nice natural lead-in to our main story of the day. Big tech is out of control. Particularly the big 3. No, not LeBron, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade. We're not talking the Miami Heat. I'm talking about Twitter, Facebook, and Google-owned YouTube. They've all recently announced their plans to stop misinformation, aka fake news, during the 2022 election. The censorship is already happening, folks. On August 17th, 2 influential conservative influencers were banned from major platforms. Libs of TikTok got banned from Facebook, and Steven Crowder from YouTube, host of Louder with Crowder. Steven explains in a tweet, Wow, won't be able to stream on YouTube because of comments from a current gubernatorial candidate on a show with all references provided. If this isn't suppression of political speech, then nothing is. See you tomorrow on Rumble and hashtag Mug Club with updates. War. He put that war thing there because there's a bunch of articles about him calling for civil war after the Trump raid. He posted a screenshot of YouTube removing the content. It said, "Hi, Steven Crowder. Our team has reviewed your content, and unfortunately, we think it violates our misinformation policy. We've removed the following content from YouTube. Podcast episode. We have updates on Trump raid, plus guest Carrie Lake, louder with Crowder. We know this might be disappointing, but it's important to us that YouTube is a safe place for all. If content breaks our rules, we remove it. If you think we've made a mistake, you can appeal and we'll take another look. Keep reading for more details." How your content violated the policy. Content that advances false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches changed the outcome of the US 2020 presidential election is not allowed on YouTube. These bans are oftentimes stated to be an accident or an algorithmic error. Algorithm? But they always seem to happen at the perfect time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why it's so important that we all create a Getter, Truth, or Rumble account, or all three. These companies care about free speech in the First Amendment. The big three obviously don't, especially if it's from an opposing ideology. Please keep in mind that lies and misinformation are protected by the First Amendment. Hell, even hate speech is. All right, let's start with Facebook, with whom I'm proud to say I've been off of there for at least 2 years. I deleted it. Preparing for elections, we are committed to securing our platform, providing transparency, and empowering people to vote. Labeling misinformation. We add warnings to posts that are debunked by fact checkers, so you can decide what to read, trust, and share. They've actually admitted in court that their fact checkers are actually opinion checkers. Removing violating content. We remove content that violates our community standards, including fake accounts and misinformation that may contribute to the risk of imminent violence or harm. Third-party fact-checking program. We started partnering with independent third-party fact-checkers, all left-leaning, in 2016 to review potential false news and content. Today, we work with 80 partners covering over 60 languages. Reducing distribution of false news. When third-party fact-checkers label content as false, we significantly reduce its distribution on Facebook and Instagram so fewer people see it. Oh, so they admit to the throttling. Protecting your vote. We're committed to fighting voter interference and suppression. That's why we remove content that includes incorrect voting information, as well as ads that advise people not to vote. If you want to vote, it's pretty easy to find out how to. You just Google how to vote in my state. Nobody is looking on these social media sites on where to go vote. Next up, we have Twitter, which I'll be honest, Twitter is my favorite mainstream social media platform, especially after discovering this week how to create a list, which is essentially a custom feed where you add the accounts you want to see. I created 4: lefties, righties, sports, and news sites. They're all private, though. Maybe I'll make them public. I don't know. In a blog post titled "Our Approach to the 2022 U.S. Midterms," Twitter breaks down their plan. Twitter is the place to find real-time, reliable information about the 2022 midterms. Whether you're looking for breaking news from reporters, information on voting, or policy positions from candidates, we aim to enable healthy civic conversation on Twitter, while ensuring people have the context they need to make informed decisions about the content they encounter. Because we're a global service, there's always an election happening on Twitter. Today, we're announcing steps we're taking ahead of the U.S. midterms to protect civic conversation on Twitter. Redesign labels. Late last year, we tested new misleading information labels and saw promising results. The new labels increased click-through rates by 17%, meaning more people were clicking labels to read debunking content. We also saw notable decreases in engagement with tweets labeled with the new design. Negative 13% replies, negative 10% retweets, and negative 15% in likes. Finding reliable information. Twitter wants to empower voters to find reliable information about how to register, how to vote, and the choices on their ballot. To make it easier to find reliable news and accurate information about participating in the civic process, we're launching a number of product updates. Here's what you could expect to see on Twitter as election day approaches in the US. Pre-bunks. So pre-bunks are the big headers at the top of the page where it says where to vote and who the candidates are. It's basically a big advertisement at the top, which you could exit out of it. They're bringing those back. State-specified event hubs. Dedicated Explore tab. As elections take place around the world, Twitter often serves as a centralized hub for real-time political conversation, resources, and breaking news. We'll be launching a dedicated Explore hub that will include national news in both English and Spanish by reputable news outlets, so the mainstream media, curated by Twitter's curation team, localized news and resources by state, voter education, public service announcements, PSAs in English and Spanish, created using information from nonpartisan government and voting advocacy organizations. They're going to help you identify who is actually running for office by putting an official tag on their account in their tweets. For example, it's going to say governor candidate. However, they say it's live, but I looked on JD Vance's Twitter and I did not see it under him. So I wouldn't be surprised if they don't throw that tag under America First candidates. Improving recommendations. We've also made and continue to make updates to how and what we recommend on Twitter. Earlier this year, in the US and Brazil, we tested ways to prevent misleading tweets from being recommended through notifications. Early results show that impressions on misleading information dropped by 1.6 million per month as a direct result of the experiment. I think a lot of that has to do with people not using Twitter as much anymore and moving over to these actual free speech platforms. But who am I? They're going to protect accounts. We're helping to protect and secure accounts of government officials, candidates for office, journalists, and more ahead of midterms, which we don't want people getting hacked. They take their rules seriously, they say. Twitter plays a critical role in empowering democratic conversations, facilitating meaningful political debate, and providing information on civic participation, not only in the US, but around the world. People deserve to trust the election conversations and content they encounter on Twitter. And then they gave a picture on how to report the misinformation. Wouldn't surprise me if just billions of bots, millions of bots start reporting people and manipulate that algorithm to their liking. And then finally, we have good old YouTube, the site that, for now, holds the monopoly for all things video. Rumble is catching up fast. YouTube holds a special place in my heart, though. I actually love the fact that you can learn how to do pretty much anything on there. That's where I learned how to whittle. It's where I learned how to make a spice rack. It's where I learned how to jumpstart an old tablet of mine 10 years ago by splicing a power cable and taking off the back and jumping it like a car. It's fantastic. What's not fantastic about YouTube is the power that it holds. I realized this power firsthand last year when my nephew and I started doing a weekly live stream where we discussed politics. It was a damn good time, I tell you what, and sometimes involved alcoholic beverages. That booze is not what got us in trouble. If we said the words COVID, vaccine, or election, the stream would get flagged and sometimes taken down instantly. Keep in mind that our show is brand new. We only did about 10 episodes, and I would say half got taken down, and we would only average 5 to 20 views per video. The algorithms understood what we were saying. Here's YouTube's plan for the 2022 midterms. Election misinformation policies. Certain types of misleading or deceptive content with serious risk of egregious harm are not allowed on YouTube. This includes certain types of misinformation that can cause real-world harm, like certain types of technically manipulated content and content interfering with democratic processes. They love that word, democratic processes. If you're posting content, these policies, certain types of content relating to free and fair democratic elections, don't post elections related content on YouTube if it fits any of descriptions noted below. Voter suppression. Content aimed to mislead voters about the time, place, means, or eligibility requirements for voting, or false claims that could materially discourage voting. Candidate eligibility. Content that advances false claims related to the technical eligibility requirements for current political candidates and sitting elected government officials to serve in office. Eligibility requirements considered are based on applicable national law and include age, citizenship, or vital status. I bet you what we're going to see in 2024 if Trump decides to run is that they're going to say across big tech that he is not eligible because he committed a crime. Incitement to interfere with democratic processes, distribution of hacked materials, content that contains hacked info, the disclosure of which may interfere with democratic processes. They're trying to cover their ass for the Hunter Biden thing. Still, election integrity, content advancing false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches occurred in certain past certified national elections, or content that claims that the certified results of those elections were false. This policy currently applies to any past U.S. presidential election, the 2021 German federal election, the 2024 and 2018 Brazilian presidential elections. Then they say, keep in mind, this isn't a complete list. That right there makes me think all those elections were stolen. I think it's doing the opposite effect. They have an election integrity section, and it says claims that a candidate only won a swing state in the U.S. 2020 presidential election due to voting machine glitches that change votes. Claims that widespread fraud or errors occurred in any past U.S. presidential election. Claims that the U.S. 2020 presidential election was rigged or stolen. Claims that fake ballots were dumped to give one candidate enough votes to win a state in past U.S. presidential election. Notice a pattern here. They're all pretty much coming up with the same policy. This is my prediction. Multiple MAGA or American First candidates will be banned from social media and banned from the internet. Getting banned from Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter can be demoralizing to a political campaign. I go as far as saying it will destroy a candidate's chance of being elected once the ban hammer hits. As always, I got facts to back it up, Jack. According to PewResearch.org, the transition of news from print, television, and radio to digital spaces has caused huge disruptions in the traditional news industries. So 86% of US adults say that they get their news from a smartphone, computer, or tablet. That's a lot. Even more astonishing, according to Statista.com, 75% of all searches in the United States are completed through Google. Hence why we use the phrase Google it. 75%. The number one is India. They use Google 94% of the time. The Washington Post coined a new phrase during the Trump presidency. Democracy dies in darkness. Dramatic, right? But I now believe that phrase to be true. The upcoming communication blackout and censorship campaign is detrimental to these United States of America. Now time for You Probably Shouldn't Tweet It. This week's winner or loser, depending on how you look at it, is Asha Rangappa, a regular contributor to MSNBC. She tweeted, "What is the GOP going to say/do when an FBI agent or judge gets harmed or killed as a result of their escalating rhetoric? Serious question. They can condemn this now. I mean, we've always, on the right, condemned violence. I'm just reminded of 2020. And this is coming from the side that allowed and encouraged unlawful protests outside of Supreme Court justices' homes because they didn't like the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So you know what, Asha Rangappa? You probably shouldn't tweet it." On to the TV ratings, brought to you by the one and only Road MN on Twitter. Our focus, as always, is going to be prime time. Starting with the 8 p.m. slot with the homie Tucker Carlson. He brought in... I'm sorry, this is from Tuesday. I got excited. Starting with the 8 p.m. slot with the homie Tucker Carlson. He brought in 3.294 million viewers, 54% of the viewership. All In with Chris Hayes had 1.5 million viewers, 26%, and Anderson Cooper 360 had 15% of the viewership, also known as 884,000 people. Handy, 9 p.m. slot, 3 million viewers, 49% of the viewership. Alex Wagner Tonight, I don't know if I've heard of this person before, they might be new. 2 million viewers, 32% of the viewership. That was on MSNBC. And CNN Tonight, 14% of the viewership, 866,000 viewers. 10 p.m. slot, The Ingram Angle, 3 million viewers, 47% of the viewership. The Last Word with L. O'Donnell, 1.8 million viewers, 29% of the viewership. And Don Lemon Tonight, 1.1 million viewers, 18% of the viewership. It's been a while since he hit a million viewers. But then at 11 o'clock, it went down to 676,000 viewers. So there's that. These ratings are important. It's a weekly reminder that you are the majority. So don't be afraid to speak your mind. Next time you post something on social media that might be considered controversial, throw in the hashtag #WeAreTheMajority. Thank you so much for checking out today's show. If you enjoyed, tell a friend. In fact, I think you and your hypothetical friend should give it a follow. New episodes every Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern. We also upload one video a week to the Rumble account at The Morning Bean. Feel free to check out the socials. Get her Twitter at Denny London. We can continue the conversation there. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. God bless and cue the music.